Georgia is known as the Peach State, but there's more in Georgia than just peaches. The geography of Georgia is widely varied also, with mountains in the north, marshes in the south, and the Atlantic Ocean to the east. Throughout the state, there are 27 operating roller coasters. These coasters are scattered throughout the state, but 17 of them can be found in the Atlanta metro area at parks like Six Flags Over Georgia and Fun Spot. Although there are many coasters in the state, there are some that stand out above the others and may even be some of the best coasters in the US. Let's take a look at the 10 best roller coasters in Georgia. Cannonball is the oldest operating coaster in Georgia, going back to May 1967 and beating Six Flags Over Georgia's Dahlonega Mine Train by just 1 month. Cannonball is a PTC wooden coaster designed by the legendary John C. Allen, and it is located at Lake Winnipesaukee in Rossview. It has a simple out-and-back layout and a modest height of 70 feet and a top speed of 50 miles per hour, but it still holds up as a classic after over 50 years of operation. It doesn't track too roughly and delivers plenty of airtime on its bunny hills. It has a nice setting in the wooded area of the park, which paired with the wooden coaster almost feels like a trip back in time. Overall, Cannonball may not be as thrilling as modern coasters, but it doesn't need to compete with them to keep giving fun rides. I give Cannonball a 7.5 out of 10. Georgia Scorcher was the last stand-up coaster built by B&M for many years, until the standing ride vehicles were brought back with the Surf Coaster model in 2023. Opening in 1999 at Six Flags Over Georgia, is more intermediate than the other stand-up coasters stat-wise, but it is smoother and less painful than more of the extreme stand-up coasters. This ride takes a 107-foot lift hill before hitting a 101-foot drop into an 81-foot vertical loop, the first of 2 inversions. Then it takes a switchback before going into an upward helix and hitting a wave turn with some nice sideways airtime. Then you hit a corkscrew before going into some more turns and dips, hitting the brake run and heading back into the station. As I mentioned, the stand-up coaster is limited on what it can do safely and comfortably for riders, but Georgia Scorcher has the perfect balance of intensity and smoothness. I give it a score of 7.6 out of 10. Daredevil Dive opened back in 2011 at Six Flags Over Georgia, and although it was the last Gerstlauer Eurofighter to open at a Six Flags park, it's one of the best of this model. The ride begins with a 95-foot vertical lift hill into a 95-degree beyond vertical drop. This is a highlight of the ride as the transition into the drop is abrupt and delivers some powerful airtime. From there you go into a dive loop, the first of 3 inversions. Then you go into an Immelman loop, then into a mid-course brake run. You drop down and to the left past an air traffic control tower, go through a tunnel, then into a Heartline roll, the last inversion, before heading into the brake run and station. This coaster is only 2,099 feet long, but packs a lot of exciting elements into its short length. Since the vehicles can only hold 6 people at a time, the ride capacity suffers, and the coaster often has a long line. The coaster isn't too different from other compact vertical coasters, but it's still a solid ride. I give Daredevil Dive a 7.7 out of 10. The Mindbender is the oldest steel coaster we've seen so far, opening in 1978 at Over Georgia, but it is a classic that has aged and been maintained well. A big part of its maintenance was a refurbishment that took place in 2020 and 2021, which replaced the trains and control system and added Riddler to its name, now Riddler Mindbender. Many people preferred the intensity of the ride with its original trains, claiming that the new, smaller trains don't run as forcefully, but the ride still has plenty of intensity to go around. The ride experience begins with an 80-foot lift hill before making a right turn and plunging into a vertical loop, the signature element of the ride's manufacturer, Schwarzkopf. When it opened, the ride was advertised as the world's first triple loop coaster. This was misleading because there are only 2 inversions. The second loop is more of a helix that does not turn riders upside down. Following the helix, the ride enters a U-turn, then drops into the final loop, which is an inversion, then travels through a tunnel and over a hill before heading back to the station. The ride makes great use of its terrain, which is always a plus. The ride runs very smoothly also, but it does have some trim brakes before the drops that can be jarring when turned on. The award-winning Mindbender is still a great coaster after almost 50 years. I give it a score of 8.0 out of 10. Now we come to the newest roller coaster at Over Georgia, Georgia Gold Rusher, which opened in early 2025. It is the first ultra surf coaster manufactured by Intamin. Though it was originally planned to be called Georgia Surfer to match the model name, the name was changed and the gold mining theme was shoehorned in so that the theming would be more cohesive with the mine train coaster and the nearby area. However, these attractions are loosely based on a real event, since there was a real gold rush following the discovery of gold in North Georgia in the early 1800s. This ride is a very basic layout with two 144-foot vertical spikes and an airtime hill, but there are other aspects that make it more exciting. The seats spin freely so that you don't know which way you'll be facing when you go up the spikes, and there are multiple forward and backward launches to get up to a top speed of 60 miles per hour. The combination of the launches and spinning is intense and disorienting. Not every launch will send you to the top of the spikes, but you will get near the top on one pass, and there is a hump in the spikes that makes you go beyond vertical for a moment. At the bottom of one of the spikes, there is a pool with a water fountain effect. Though you don't get wet, the effect is a nice touch. The ride uses these things to its advantage, even though the layout may look boring. I give it a score of 8.1 out of 10. This is a cloned ride model that is known for its intensity, but this installation at Six Flags Over Georgia one-ups the others in terms of its intensity. The B&M inverted coaster opened here in 1997 and was the 8th Batman coaster to be installed. Like its other clones, the one in Georgia is 105 foot tall, 2,700 feet long, and has 5 inversions. Its top speed is listed as 50 miles per hour and maximum G-force at 4 Gs, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was faster and more forceful than that. After the ride leaves the Bat Cave and climbs up the 105-foot lift hill, it takes a left-handed curve drop into a vertical loop and straight into a 0G roll and another vertical loop. You get a short break from the intense inversions as you fly through an upward helix, then enter the ride's signature element, the wing over corkscrew. You make a U-turn before heading through another wing over, then take an upward curve to return to the station. In a short ride time of around 1 minute 20 seconds, the ride packs in a flurry of elements one after another. The force and pacing is almost too much, and after hitting the brake run, you'll be left in shock. I give Batman the Ride a score of 8.2 out of 10. This is another clone of a ride that is perhaps the best of its model. This version of Superman at Six Flags Over Georgia was the original, and also the first B&M flying coaster to open in the US back in 2002. Although it's a clone, this model seems to be specifically designed for Over Georgia since it was built on a hillside and interacts with the natural terrain. This ride does suffer from long lines since it usually only operates one train, which is coupled with long loading times. However, it creates the flying sensation well, which is still unique for a roller coaster experience over 20 years later. It begins by climbing up a 106-foot lift hill, then plunging into a mild curved drop to the right. Then you enter possibly the most intense element in the state of Georgia, a 78-foot pretzel loop. This is basically a vertical loop that inverts at the bottom instead of the top, unique to flying coasters due to the trains hanging under the track and the high center of gravity of the riders. That being said, you feel the 3 Gs of force like an elephant on your chest at the bottom of the loop. The rest of the ride is more free-flowing and graceful as you fly around the hillside, experiencing a second inversion and an inline twist before heading to the station. The original flying coaster in the US is still a great experience after over 20 years, and the Superman theme is a perfect fit. I give it a score of 8.3 out of 10. Twisted Cyclone is a small but mighty hybrid coaster that replaced the rough and unpopular Georgia Cyclone in 2018. It's actually the most recent RMC iBox coaster to open at a Six Flags park, opening in May of that year. At 100 feet tall, the ride begins by descending from the station into some wacky off-axis bunny hills, climbing its lift hill, then going into a powerful 75-degree drop through the wooden structure. The next element is a reverse cobra roll, a double inversion that starts with a step-up underflip, turns to the right, then goes into a barrel roll down drop. Then you get probably the most exciting element on the ride, a wave turn, with what seems like several seconds of sideways airtime. After a turnaround, you enter a zero-G roll, which was placed inside the wooden structure, hit some airtime hills and curves before hitting the brake run. Like many of the coasters at Six Flags Over Georgia, it suffers what seems to be a short ride duration. With 2,400 feet of track, the ride lasts about 1 minute 20 seconds, the same as Batman, from leaving the station to the brake run. However, it packs a lot of unique and intense elements into that time at a breakneck pace. I give it a score of 9.0 out of 10. Goliath is the giant of a hypercoaster that towers over Six Flags Over Georgia right at the park entrance. Opening in 2006, it was built by B&M and its layout crosses over walkways in the park, even going outside the park for a good portion of its layout. Begins with a 200-foot lift hill, and here you can get a good view of the Atlanta skyline if you look to the right. Then you enter 170-foot drop, which doesn't go all the way to the ground due to being over the pathways. As you crest over the next hill, you get some powerful airtime, and the following drop is actually larger than the first at 175 feet. After another camelback hill, you enter a powerful downward helix that seems to suck you down to the earth. After another camelback hill, you hit a horseshoe turnaround. On the return to the station, you hit 3 more hills with ejector airtime before hitting the brake run. The layout may be repetitive, but each hill you crest delivers some powerful airtime, not to mention the helix that delivers some intense positive Gs. The only minor complaint is that the ride seems to have a slight rattle, which doesn't bother me, but some might be sensitive to it. This is my best coaster at Over Georgia and my second favorite in the state. I give it a score of 9.2 out of 10. Before we get to Georgia's number 1 coaster, here are some honorable mentions that didn't make the top 10. Swamp Thing is located at Wild Adventures, the only major park in South Georgia. It's a standard Vekoma suspended family coaster. Most of the older models are terrible, but this one actually crosses over the alligator exhibit, which adds some points to its score. Twisted Typhoon is a Vekoma suspended looping coaster also located at Wild Adventures. The Vekoma SLC model is notoriously terrible, although some are better than others. I just wanted to mention it for being probably the most thrilling coaster in South Georgia. Blue Hawk is also a Vekoma looping coaster located at Six Flags Over Georgia. Its layout is almost identical to the Vekoma SLC, but the trains sit on top of the track rather than being suspended below it. The lift hill also has to be one of the slowest of all time. There is some roughness to the ride, but with its vest restraints, it is bearable, and some moments are fun. Great American Scream Machine broke records in its day for being the longest, tallest, and fastest coaster in the world. Now over 50 years old, it's earned its place as an ace landmark coaster, but over time other coasters have surpassed it. Even some of its contemporaries have aged better. It's still a pleasant ride experience and not too rough, but perhaps not as thrilling as it was back in the day. This is the best coaster in Georgia, surprisingly located at a roadside family fun center south of Atlanta called Fun Spot America. The RMC All Steel iBox coaster opened here in 2023, and it towers over the landscape at 155 feet tall. It's themed to spaceflight training and named after the Airy family who owns the Fun Spot parks in Georgia and Central Florida. After over 4 years of planning and construction, John Airy Jr. fulfilled his dream of building a world-class coaster in one of his parks. The ride begins with some bunny hills before climbing the lift hill and plunging into the 83-degree drop. Then you enter the first inversion, a Raven Truss dive, which passes through the structure. Next comes the longest zero-G stall in North America, with several seconds of being suspended out of your seat upside down, an insane sensation. You get an Outer Banks curve next, then go into a double up with strong airtime at its peaks. Then comes the arcade roll, a barrel roll over the arcade which is taken at a breakneck pace. You take a curve over the pond before going through the final inversion, zero-G roll. The finale concludes with 4 bunny hills that send you out of your seat then rapidly pull you back down. It's amazing how a roller coaster built on one man's dream manages to outclass other coasters built by billion-dollar companies. I give Airy Force 1 a score of 9.5 out of 10. Those are my top 10 coasters in Georgia. 8 out of 10 of these are located at Six Flags, which is no surprise, having more coasters than any other park in the state with 12. The other 2 are located at Lake Winnie and Fun Spot. I might have upset some fans of Dahlonega Mine Train or Wildcat at the North Georgia State Fair for leaving those out, but let me know your favorite coaster in Georgia in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next voyage.